and welcome to Story X Story, the podcast by My Matter that dives deep into stories across pop culture, plus gives you advice on creating your own. It's episode 230, which kind of feels like a milestone. I don't know, round number or something, but it's a lot of numbers. And I'm your co-host, Nigel.
I am Tazziii, content creator and co-host.
And for our behind the story episodes, you know that we like to talk to creative professionals and practitioners across industries to unpack their journey. And today we're going to hear the story behind Michael Nakan, the founder of Comixit. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me, Nigel. And it's a pleasure to be your 230th guest. Feels like a milestone for me too.
Yeah, because we've been in the 20s and it just went up to 30. I was like, oh, that looks different. So it's something. It's something. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining, and definitely interested to get your perspective on comics and reading and literacy and everything you're doing with Comixit as well. So yeah, and for listeners, you can subscribe to Story X Story wherever you get your podcast from. That includes Apple Podcasts and Spotify, YouTube as well. We're putting episodes on YouTube. So if you're one of those people who like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, I say that like I'm also not one of those people, but you've got that option as well. You can also send us your feedback and questions in a variety of ways. You can chat with us in the My Matter Studio 77 Discord. We are also available the old-fashioned way. Email us studio77@mymatter.com, or throw your thoughts at us on social media. We are at My Matter on Twitter, at My Matter TV on Instagram and TikTok, and at mymatter.com on Blue Sky. You can get to Tazziii at Life of a W Gamer on Instagram and TikTok, and at Tazziii on everything else. You can also check out the brand at mymatter.com to see what we're about, where we've got some plans in the works for the rest of this year and next year, including a new website. But you can head there for now to see what we do, why we do it, and how you can get involved. So before we learn more about our guest today, let's update you with the latest from the My Matter universe. We're talking about comics. We do manga. We have opportunities for people to get to our manga as well. So in the next month or so, November, we've got some things coming up for November. So I will be going to the Malta Comic Con, making what is becoming a yearly pilgrimage to sunnier skies. Although last time it was raining. It actually rained last year like it was in London, which was somewhat disappointing, but definitely didn't take the shine of what is a really cool event. Very good community feel and international community feel from guests that attend from different parts of Europe mainly, but some further out as well. So I'll be there the 8th and 9th of November, bringing our manga. You can check out our universe there. If you happen to be in Malta, I will be showcasing the collection as well. And then I'll be back, and the following week going to Thought Bubble, which is a little closer to home in Harrogate, the north of England, on November the 15th and 16th. Another event I've been to a number of times. I think I need two hands to count the amount of times I've been to both events, maybe. So I'll be in the Harrogate Convention Centre for 2 days celebrating independent comics. So as many independent comic creators as the eye can see in that space. So I'll be there over the weekend, and also doing a workshop on the Saturday for young creators aged 10 and up, getting into making their comics as well. So one of the comics I'll be bringing is Origins Against All Odds, and that features Tazziii for a reflective and hope-filled manga about pursuing your creative career goals in the face of resistance from doubters and the world around you. So you can also get that online, mymatter.com. We have some events to come for our Do I Look Like a Gamer campaign as well. We have recently just been to the London Comic Con. We did a bunch of things there. At some point, videos, photos will be up. We're doing our usual thing, showcasing the campaign photos, doing panels as well. So if you missed us this time around, we have every intention of returning in May and October in 2026. So stay tuned for that. What you can get involved with is our next in-person event as part of the campaign, which is the Friends and Family Game Design Jam on Saturday, November the 29th. We'll be at Square Enix at their headquarters in South London for an event where you can come and learn to create your own tabletop game and get feedback from games professionals. And we might hand out some prizes as well. So it's an event designed for all ages and experience levels. It's all about promoting creativity and teamwork, learning about the games industry in a fun environment. We've been to the offices, we've seen the space. It's very fun. A lot of statues, a lot of swords, and it has a kitchen as well. I think that's all I can say without breaking the NDA.
So many swords.
Yeah. So yeah, get on that because spaces are limited. So definitely RSVP to secure your spot. It's a free event. But like I say, space is limited. We have more campaign announcements to come, so stay tuned for other ways you can get involved this year and next. And if you are one of the many, many people who spend their time on Twitch, why not spend your time on Twitch watching us do different shows as part of our Studio 77 activity lineup? So we host different shows with creative professionals. We also play games. Each month, you can catch a range of shows we do depending on the month. We've got the Studio 77 report, which we're going to be doing a new version, so stay tuned for that. New format for that coming up. We've got casual conversations with comic creators where I speak to a different comic creator each month about them, their work, their process, and whatever else comes up in the conversation. And Games Night, where we play games with our community, play a different game each time, or sometimes we come back to games that we're fond of. So you can join us in the chat for all of those shows. Can't remember which one's the next one, but yeah, follow us on Twitch. And if you're a young, aspiring creative professional or you know of one, send them our way because you can be part of the Mayamada Showrunners Work Experience Program. So we're creating opportunities for young people aged 16 and up to work with our team across comic production, events, and content creation. And we've got a new group starting on our program at the moment. We've had some people join us at recent events, everyone getting a chance to see what it's like to work in the real world of work. Apparently it's a shock to some people. They'll get it. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But that's us. Now, with all that being said, let's go behind the story with today's guest. We're speaking to Michael, who is a creative entrepreneur working at the intersection of media and tech across Europe, US, Asia, and is currently building Comixit, the world's most inspiring comics app for kids, and is the founding member of Comic Book UK. So, Michael, listeners of the podcast and those who follow Mayamada will know that creativity is very important to us. But to get us started, what does creativity mean to you?
I first just have to say, Nigel, congratulations on all the events that you and Mayamada are putting on and for hosting this podcast and trying to demystify a very mysterious sort of thing, which is being a creative professional. So hats
Who
off to
knows?
you. Who knows?
I appreciate that. We're working it out ourselves.
Yeah, maybe we'll learn what it means over the course of this conversation, you and me. So, yeah, I think creativity for me has always been the most important part of my life. And it's always been the most inspirational thing for me. When I was young, I used to read a lot. I used to play a lot of video games. I used to watch a lot of movies. And those influences for those stories, which were crafted by, great storytellers from across the world, very much influenced my worldview. So to answer your question, I think creativity is the force through which we learn from generations that came before and from different parts of the world and how to empathize with our fellow man, to be honest. And that's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing at Comixit and so kind of alarmed, I guess, writ large at the kind of wider media landscape, which has strayed quite massively away from what where I derive my sort of joy from creativity from.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that there's some optimism mixed with dread in there. So, no, I like that definition though. So yeah, I'm all for that. Like learning from people who came before and remixing things and adding our experiences to it as well. So no, that sounds good. So we met. Was it last year? Maybe think it was
Yeah, last year.
yeah,
Yeah.
last year. And I know you've been through some like changes. We'll get into Comixit, but just to take a snapshot of where you are, because you have recently, I guess, pivoted is the word, from entering the world of comics in a general
Mhm.
sense to now being very focused on young people reading comics and literacy. So can you just give us a snapshot of like where you are with Comixit and your journey so far?
Yeah, definitely. I will on the comics side, as you adeptly mentioned, we are building the most inspiring place for kids to read and create comics, and we are doing that in order to tackle for two reasons. One is to tackle the kids' literacy crisis, which has been sort of laid bare by recent data from the National Literacy Trust, showing that less than 1 in 3 kids in the UK enjoy reading at the moment. Reading is at a 2-decade low, et cetera, et cetera. The stats are pretty stark and damning. And our efforts with Comixit is to address that crisis by giving access to lots of great comics, which are all age appropriate and all available to read at one easy to afford price tag. And then also giving kids the ability to create their own comics and learn how to create their own characters and their own stories. And what's very important to us on that side is to retain, even though we're a digital product, we still have a huge amount of respect for both the print in terms of selling physical books and also in terms of kids drawing and having the sort of pen to paper experience. So that's what we're really focused on, is creating a space where kids can read great comics, be inspired by them, and then go off and draw their own and make those into larger stories. And it goes kind of back actually to what I was saying earlier, just about my own experience.
Mm,
All these sort of influences for me when I was younger very much melded together. Film, video games, books, etc., would sort of meld together for me into one cohesive story strand that I enjoyed sort of manifesting in my mind. And what excites me about what we're doing with Comixit is giving kids the ability to, yeah, be inspired by professional stories and then go off and tell their own stories, all through the medium of comics, where anything is possible with words and pictures. So I think that's so that's what we're up to. We are in beta stage right now. We will be out in the marketplace very soon, hopefully this side of Christmas. And we will be announcing some large partnerships with well-known publishers in the UK and beyond in short order. So yeah, if anyone's interested, our website is comixit.app. You can also follow us on Instagram at comixit.app. Not to throw that plug in too early, but just just saying.
cool. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we'll definitely like dig into that. And because you
Mm.
were recently also at the Frankfurt Book Fair as well. Is
But
that how recent was that? And what was your experience like there?
yeah, so that was just a few years ago. That was a really good experience. I was part of the Webtoon Pavilion, which was the inaugural effort by the Frankfurt Book Fair to recognize new Webtoon platforms that are springing
Mm,
up all over the world. So I was there alongside an Indian platform and a Taiwanese platform, as well as agents from Europe and the US. So that was a really
right.
interesting experience because it was deliberately done in such a way. It wasn't that the Koreans weren't invited, but it was done in such a way to celebrate that the format of Webtoon, vertical scroll comics, has
Oh,
kind of
not
spread.
specifically Webtoonists, because Webtoon is a
Exactly.
brand in itself.
It is. It is. And when I say Webtoon, I mean vertical scroll comic. The
Right.
format of Webtoon has spread beyond the shores of Korea and is available. New platforms like ours are utilizing this format to tell stories in a new way. And to your point, you asked how we kind of ended up in this position when we first. And we can go into my background, I suppose, in a second. But when we first
Mm,
entered the world of comics, the goal was to create a general entertainment product, utilizing great comics and converting them from page format into Webtoon format with the intention of releasing them to a wide audience so they could enjoy them in a new format. What we discovered was twofold. One was there was a huge demand for this in from kids publishers specifically, who were looking to reach kids on devices in a new way, but
Mm,
also that there was more of a social imperative, I suppose, or more of a social good to be done, and more of a mission that we could really get excited about as an organization. Because these vertical scroll comics in the UK haven't really become very mainstream yet amongst younger kids. And they're spending so much time on their devices playing Roblox or watching YouTube. And there's such a
mm,
hunger from parents and actually, I think, from kids. Our research suggests that actually kids are hungry for more options than just gaming and videos. And that's where we're coming in. And we're really keen to try to get them reading in a new format and in an accessible, fun way where they already are, and kind of supplementing the rise in kids' interest in comics and graphic novels.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. I mean, I was recently in Forbidden Planet in Camden here in London, and while I was there, there's a kid came in with his mum, I think his sister and dad came in afterwards, and the mum was just like, because the kid he was just off. He knew what he wanted, and he was just, I think it was his birthday recently, so he just had money to burn, and his mum was like, I don't really get it, but he's into it. He's reading, and it's great. So I started asking him like, what is he reading? And he must have been, I don't know, he looked like between maybe 11 and 13, and he had a good list. I think like Vinland Saga was on there for
Mm.
those, which is quite a like mature, I wouldn't say inappropriate, but just definitely mature concept. So I feel like the interest is there given the awareness,
Yeah,
so that's really good.
100%. And I think, yeah, when you dig into the data from the National Literacy Trust, I think there is a particular alarm bells ringing around boys in particular in
Yeah.
the UK reading, and that those alarm bells are kind of only silenced by comics. That those are that is the medium that British boys today enjoy reading. And I
Mm,
think that we have a really great opportunity, responsibility, whatever you want to call it, to actually capture that interest and attention and deliver reading in a format that they're going to fall in love with and become lifelong readers as a result. I saw an article in I think the Sunday Times is running a sort of get into reading campaign, and I think Michael Morpurgo wrote a piece today saying that it's shocking that in a country that boasts Shakespeare and Tennyson, that we don't have a school library in every school. And I think that's
yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely the case, and I think we don't have to go into why that's happened, but that is the scenario that we're in today. That a lot of kids just don't have
Like,
access to books or to comics or to graphic novels or any form of reading, and it's alarming, and it's something that needs to change.
yeah, there was, oh my. So I was recently at the Booksellers Children's Conference, and you just reminded me that was a stat that came up. So I don't know, like Tazzy, you are so big on libraries and like their role in
Mm.
communities. So I don't know if you knew this, but there was someone, and forgive me, I've forgotten her name, but someone high up, I think at one of the big publishers, someone important, and was on stage giving like the keynote and things, and it was like, oh, and the aim to put a library in every school, because was it, I don't know what the stat is exactly, like 1 in 3 or some percentage of schools that don't have a library in a school. I did not know that.
Wow.
So
I didn't know
Wow.
that.
I just assumed every
I
school had
think,
a
Yeah.
library. Like, why
yeah,
would you
me
not?
too. Like, I think both my primary school and my secondary school had a library. My secondary school had a 2-floor library, sixth form only upstairs.
Well, I think, yeah, Nigel, you and I were both at the Sheffield Children's Media Conference over
Yeah.
the summer, and they during the National Literacy Trust kind of event there, they spoke a lot about how there was a real dearth of libraries in the UK, and they actually asked someone in the audience asked a question, and they were from Ireland, and they were saying that in Ireland the situation is completely different, and they over-index with libraries. They have, I think, more libraries than schools or something. So anyway,
Right.
it doesn't have to be like this.
No.
Is the takeaway. I mean, I should also point out, probably given that we all have a strong commitment to UK literacy, I should point out that my accent is very misleading. I actually grew up in the UK. I'm born and raised in the UK in London, but went to an international school, which is why I have an American accent. But I am just as passionate about the state of the UK as anybody
Right. Okay.
else.
Oh, well, thanks for clearing that up, because I had
Yeah,
made an assumption. So let's.
yeah,
You're not the first person I know that is like fully like born here, grew up here, that has an American accent. So
Really, I'd like to.
yeah.
I'd like to form a support group with him.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's good to know. Well, my wife has a Americanized accent as well, and she's from Switzerland, but went to one of these schools. So
Uh,
it gets you. It gets you,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. Well, okay. All right. Let me adjust my preconceived notions, and we will continue with the interview. So, speaking of your sort of background and everything, do you want to like tell us where? Well, I guess you told us where you did grow up, and I'm interested to know because you talked about like the different things that you were into. At what point in your life was that interest in shows, stories like
Mm.
sparked?
Well, I think my background was growing up in London, attending an international school, and I always had a very strong interest in stories and their relationship with culture and nationality. And from a global perspective, I think that was always very interesting to me. And so this will come full circle, I promise, because yeah, for me, stories were always a window into other places into other minds, into other ways of thinking and being. And I really, really wanted to be a journalist, actually, as a result of that. So my initial interest in sort of the creative sector, the media sector, was journalism. And I went to university in the US, to a university called Johns Hopkins in Baltimore.
Mm.
And I was really keen on being a journalist. I was part of the school paper. I wrote an article in the school, in the Johns Hopkins newspaper, about juvenile justice in Baltimore, because coming from London, I was very surprised. Again, despite the accent, I was really surprised to see in the US how the legal system worked and how the juvenile justice system worked. And I was really shocked at how, at least this is sort of circa 2010, how kids were basically being put into these juvenile justice centers and left there for months and months and months due to a lack of capacity to place them in rehabilitation centers. And I learned about this in one of my classes. And this was something which everyone else, all the sort of people who grew up in the US, sort of took for granted, but I was really shocked by. And so I wound up writing an article in the Baltimore Sun about this.
Right.
And that then led me to receiving a grant to make a documentary on the subject. And I made a documentary which was released locally in Baltimore, got a kind of local release whilst I was at university. And that was
Okay.
seen, yeah, and that was seen by one of the producers of House of Cards, who hired me to work on House of Cards. And that's how I kind of got into scripted storytelling out of kind of nonfiction into
Mm.
fiction. And I also did internships and things like that. And I'd be very happy to, talk more about the US versus UK system and,
Yeah.
pre-COVID to now and everything. But yeah, I worked on House of Cards. And then after that, I worked at HBO in New York, and then my visa ran out because despite the accent, not American. So I came back to the UK, stayed in the sort of studio system for a bit when I worked at Universal, and in all of these places working at kind of associate level, junior mid level, and
Mm.
then went over to as a creative exec at Shoebox Films, which is Joe Wright's production company. Joe being the director of Atonement, Pride and Prejudice,
Mm.
Darkest Hour, sort of big British period dramas. And I was involved in packaging scripts. I was involved in creative development. I was involved in everything related to the kind of development phase of a television show in the UK and the US, because my remit was really to try to access the US market for Shoebox. So I had a lot of experience doing that. And then at this point, everybody was very excited about what was happening in East Asia. This was sort of 2017 or so. And in particular, China was this hugely interesting place that everyone was really excited about. So I decided at that point in my conversations in the UK, I realized that there wasn't a huge amount of an understanding or awareness of what was happening in China, certainly not as much as in the US. And so I thought there'd be an interesting opportunity to kind of spread these national borders and set up a firm, which I did, which basically facilitated a trade in the documentary space, in the film space between the UK and China. And that was a very exciting and fulfilling goal because it was connecting two very, very different cultures, which was, again, sort of my main interest in the media. And very, very interesting. Unfortunately, COVID kind of put paid to the China market for the UK.
Right.
and
Okay.
that was after COVID. I started a new company alongside David Barron, who's a producer of Harry Potter, and Linda Jensen, who's the CEO of HBO Europe, called Envision Entertainment. And this company basically took all of I'd learned up until this point in terms of creatively developing and packaging IP for film and television around the world and applied it on a global basis. So we've developed projects in Asia, in the US, in the UK. We've sold projects to Hulu, to Tomorrow Studios, to Universal International in the UK. And we actually made a series already in Japan, which was quite successful over there, called Connected, the Homebound Detective, which was for Hulu Japan, Japanese language series, which I co-created with a Japanese creator, which I'd be very happy to discuss as well, because that was a really cool experience.
Because you were the first, what was it, the first Westerner to responsible for an original Japanese series? I read.
I believe so, yeah. So that's what they told me. I mean, when they gave us the scripts with our names on it, they didn't even have like the option to write in Western sort of left to right. It was all top to bottom. So it was my name top to bottom next to the Japanese characters, which looked pretty funny. But yeah, so I think yeah, I was the first Western person to create an original series for Japanese television with a Japanese co-creator, of course. And yeah, and that company still exists and is still very active. Envision Entertainment. David is sort of running that these days. And we got into the comic space because we saw this very, very exciting opportunity because of all my travels to Asia. I sort of saw Webtoon, going back to the original, the Naver Webtoon, the Korean Webtoon,
Yeah.
grow massively in all my trips over there before and after COVID. And I don't want to act as if I was so ahead of the curve, but I felt it wasn't something that particularly wide awareness at this point in the West. And it was something, again, I thought was very, very cool, very, very culturally interesting. This great idea of having this space where people can read news stories, read comics on your phone, anywhere, and just sort of seeing with my own eyes how prevalent this has become in Korea made me very, very interested in the media. And yeah, we initially set out, like I said, to create a new version of this for Western markets, and then realized along the way that the best application of this technology would be addressing the kids crisis and making a product specifically for kids. And that's what I'm focusing on now. That's my that's the capacity in which I speak to you today is from the comics angle.
That's interesting. Do you feel like were it not for the disruption caused by the pandemic, you would not be on this path, or was that always in the back of your mind to get into comics sometime?
I think it was always part of my sort of my love for the medium, and I really, really loved comics growing up, particularly Marvel comics, and really all sorts of indie ones as well. So I definitely always had a huge amount of interest and respect for the medium. I always thought, and this was particularly true in the kind of heyday of comics to screen adaptations, I always thought that some of the best original ideas were birthed in comics. So I think there was always going to be, a world where I moved more into that position, and it was something that was always very interesting to me. But it's difficult to know, the
Yeah.
pre-pandemic world is a different world to the one we live in today. So who knows?
Sure. Okay. And because you described, I mean, that's quite a journey, and with some very well recognized like names and brands and properties, and then in a sense, I was going to say like not leave. I guess you're still connected, but like starting your own thing after already
Mm.
starting your own thing with Envision. How do you? Is that like a explanation you have to make to friends, partners, family that what sounds like I'll use air quotes, stable position of I'm gonna work for like television companies, again, well-known television companies, to like, oh no, I'm gonna go start my own thing? Like, is that a conversation you have to, do you have to convince someone to for making that decision? What was that like?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is, in the kind of wider world, still very much a sense of stability that exists around major, brands, and whether that's actually reflected in the day-to-day life of people working in film and TV today, I'm not sure. But it is definitely still considered to be, yeah, something that is stable, or that there is a clear path to rise within. I think it was a challenge. I felt kind of, yeah, my own position was I felt very, very excited and enthusiastic, particularly when we realized that the technology we were developing could be used to help kids. I felt
Mm,
very, very excited about that mission and kind of a renewed sense of urgency and excitement. But you definitely to weigh that against the fact that there are, there are those kind of conceptions of, oh, I thought you were in film and TV and this is something
mm,
new. And I think that probably any creative entrepreneur who works across different media probably has those kinds of feelings, because although these different creative sectors are related and linked, they are still somewhat siloed. And so you definitely, get accustomed to a new place and a new identity when
mm.
you move between things. But the good thing is that the comic space is very, very welcoming, and a very, very nice group of people. And I'm very, yeah, happy to be a part of it.
Cool. And perhaps when you were maybe entering comics or even just starting your career full stop, was there any good advice that someone else gave to you when you were starting in your respective journeys, and did you manage to follow it?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of advice that came to me from lots of people. I think I always also really wanted to be a writer. That was another, I mentioned I was, interested in being a journalist. And I still harbor, ambitions to write in the future and do some writing on the side and things like that. I was in the Writers Guild of Great Britain for a little bit because I sold a pilot to a company called Anyway Content a while ago. So I definitely felt like some good advice that I got on that side, on the creative side, was to ensure that you kind of understood the business. Because if you are just solely focused on the creative, it obviously can work out really well for you if you're just a great creative. But a lot of the time, the system doesn't necessarily exist to reward who has the best creative. The
Mm,
system often rewards those with the most leverage. And I think that's something which I didn't, and maybe that's more on the film and TV side than publishing side, but I would say that is the case in film and TV, the who has leverage and who has heat and who has the right routes to market, you know, that's always been important. I think it's only more important now. So I think that would be advice I would give to anyone interested in a creative career is, so you don't necessarily have to go as all in on the business as I have and have multiple companies and, be really, really familiar with how to raise money and all that kind of stuff. But definitely have an awareness of the business that you're working in. And I would also say that having, I guess, quite a unique background across lots of different countries, also kind of realizing that each country has a different way of doing things in the creative sector, and there are different ecosystems that exist. Again, I can imagine maybe that is something which isn't immediately apparent to somebody
mm,
who is from the on the outside of the creative sector. Yeah, and understanding that in Europe they have a large, there's a lot of government support and there's a lot of government subsidies. In the
yeah.
U.S., there's a huge amount of capital flowing around, both private and institutional. The UK kind of sits somewhere in between, and then Asia is its own sort of beast. I think understanding that is important because if not, if you don't understand it, you do sometimes, I think, risk feeling upset at yourself that you weren't able to get something across the line or do something that you want it to do, but actually maybe the system you work in isn't really set up to do that. Maybe you have to change systems. I think that's
Right.
a really key consideration before setting out on a creative project or career, actually.
Yeah, no, I wish I'd got and or listened to that advice when I was I think it took me a bit too long. Is like it is, and it's a tough thing because particularly with like creative things, because often it's made by people who actually care about the thing being created, and it's sort of like an internal conflict of making it commercial, but then it comes with the existential dread of like how am I going to continue making money to make this sustainable. So it's like that internal struggle, but knowing the business side of it does help a lot. So,
I think it's really important because you need to understand the yeah, like I think that when you come out of school, particularly my degree was in writing, creative writing.
mm,
So I came out of school thinking I was a good writer. I still think I'm a pretty decent writer, but like and you're kind of used to at that point being assessed in a fair environment where there's a
yeah,
deadline and you
keyword
are
fair.
yeah, and everybody in the class gives the story or the novel or the essay to the professor, and the professor grades it, and that's kind of the way it works. And you don't realize how much things like momentum and branding, press, and all that kind of stuff plays into decision making in a corporate level. And then you also don't realize how, yeah, it's an entirely different it's just an entirely different metric. And I think to some degree a challenge that creative people have, and I think I've witnessed this sometimes. I think sometimes people don't ever necessarily realize that there are these other metrics involved, and people can
Yeah,
carry on thinking that it is just about how good you are, and it is, and I should be very clear, it is about how good you are. If you are an amazing creative, you will get discovered and you will do something. So I'm not it is about the talent, but there are other things that you should understand that weigh into decisions that may or may not get your IP to market or your creativity to a wider level.
yeah, no, that's a really important point, especially like you mentioned the going from like the school environment where, like you say, it's fair, and then a lot of people, I'd say, too many, then carry that expectation over into the quote unquote real world and expecting that same fairness to carry over, and it doesn't. So yeah, no, that's solid advice. Would you say, aside from like the business side of things, or maybe as part of it, were there any other skills or experiences that you brought over from film and TV that you feel has helped with what you're doing now in comics and this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think despite having said earlier that that these sectors are siloed, they are actually intimately related. And I think having an understanding of how IP rights work and how the film and television industry works and rights sales and second windows and all that kind of business is massively applicable to comics and publishing. I think the broader challenge in today's day and age, to be honest, is understanding more about the tech landscape, because tech is an entirely different kettle of fish, I think, and
Mm,
that's something which I think learned a lot about over the last 18 months or so in sort of launching this new venture. And I think that's something which would be worth even understanding, even if it's not something that you necessarily want to be involved with, understanding how, say, Netflix makes decisions versus how, a studio in the 1990s would have made decisions,
mm,
is valuable because the economic model is so different. To give you an example, in when I was learning to, it's an obvious example, but when I was learning what a good screenplay was, I used to work for Scott Rudin in New York, and Scott was this like heavy duty, really great producer, but was a challenging guy in lots of reasons, for lots of other ways. And yeah, he's sort of retired now, pseudo retired, etc. But he was really good at story, and he sort of viewed in everyone how important the quality of the kind of narrative and the story was in all the films he put together. And I think that it's not to say that that's been lost, but I do think that something like Scott produced There Will Be Blood, and the first
Okay.
20 minutes,
Okay.
the first
I mean, that's
20
a good
minutes,
story.
yeah, amazing story, but the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
20 minutes are silent, and There Will Be Blood. And is it conceivable that in 2025 There Will Be Blood would be commissioned, where on a streaming platform, you need something really to
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
in the first 90 seconds, or someone's going to scroll off? And I think understanding these seismic changes to the way that content is consumed and the money is made from content is really important if you want to be a creative, because you will, yeah, you need to have that sense of what kind of stories you're telling, for which platforms, for whom. And I think it has changed a lot, and as creatives we have to embrace that change and understand it in order to continue making great art.
Yeah, continue making, and just for like consumers, because you mentioned earlier in terms of like, I guess as my matter, part of our role, or as we see it, is like that demystifying thing, and
Mm.
it strikes me as, it's always struck me as odd. Not, I don't know if odd is the right word, just I don't know, a shame, a shame that the maybe the lack of understanding that the, let's say, the average consumer has about that stuff that you just said. So we see it in games a lot, because the judgment that comes out, and it comes from a place of, I don't say this in a disparaging way necessarily, but like ignorance of, like, you're
Mm.
saying things and you don't know how it works. You might think and there's certainly a lot of people on social media who think they know how things work, and they don't. And it's like you don't understand. So you're
Yeah.
missing out on why why this show got cancelled, or why this one got made versus that one, or whatever it might be. And I think that better understanding would help everyone as well. So it's good for you to mention that. So given that, then what do you think makes a good story, like comic TV or otherwise, given, because you talked about, you say Netflix, the idea of having like silence at the start of a story, or even you talking about webtoon and that
Mm.
idea of scrolling. So
Yeah.
once upon a time, I guess the only way was you'd have a physical book, and you're talking about page
Hmm.
turns, and there's generations of comic creators who are dialed into that page turn, and keeping the
Yeah.
interest across the page, whereas now it's scrolling. How do you think that
Yeah.
changes stories? Like, what makes a good story now, when people can just click off at any point?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think fundamentally the values that exist for storytelling are resolute and are resonate across time. Great stories are about great characters first and foremost, and they're about characters that go on a journey of discovery and change over the course of that discovery. And they learn something about themselves, and as a result you learn something about yourself. You could argue that various forms of popular content, maybe don't have that level of sort of quality to their stories. But I think the things that really, I would push back on that a bit, because I think the things that really work and really sort of echo down the ages and become hits and become part of popular culture, to your point, always have a strong narrative arc for a protagonist that goes on a journey and learns something about themselves. And the entire ethos, the entire world building element, the entire anything else that is important as media changes, it is all fundamentally about characters who are flawed, confronting their flaws. And I think that's the case whether you're doing adult or child's content. I think
Yeah.
when it comes to kids stories, I think it is a lot about like confronting your anxieties or your fears about growing up, or your fears you'll be less than, etc. These are in many ways like completely universal themes that again echo across cultures. And I think that's the receptacle that exists for stories like that. That is why stories are so critical to our development. I think in
Mm.
terms of the format, for starters, I'll say at Comixit, we're very committed to the printed page. I think that like kids still do read books. There's obviously still a major and a must-have tradition of bedtime stories on physical paper, the page turn, etc. These are all things that should and must remain in society and in culture. And when you look at like sort of scrolling stories, etc., for us, it's not so much about how it's just about, these are stories that come at a different time, that kids can engage with at a different time, that people can engage with at different times. And I think that the key element to be aware of is that, your audience is no longer a captured audience. They're not sitting in a cinema. They're not, and not going to
Yeah,
leave for
yeah.
2 hours.
They're on the
They're
bus.
not exactly. They're on the bus. They're on their phone, and you're not just competing for their attention against other stories and other comics in a bookshop or in Blockbuster. Obviously, I mean, so it goes without saying. But like, now you're competing with mobile games, or checking their email or whatever. You're competing with the whole world of media is competing with each other for attention. And I think that
Mm,
you do need to be aware of those things. But that doesn't mean, and I think where comics, because they are relatively low cost to create, that is where comics can really shine, because people want original stories. They want things that feel different. Our research and testing the app is really exciting because it shows that kids do initially gravitate to maybe IPs that they are familiar with, but then, really want to find something new and different that looks different. Manga obviously works really well, but other stories from other countries and other art styles also appeal. So I think it isn't necessarily about the story structure doesn't have to change. It's just about an awareness of, yeah, it's not that, and it's certainly not that you can't be slow anymore either, but you do just have to be aware that you're competing in a
mm.
wider environment for people's attention, and you need to tell your stories accordingly, maybe with more cliffhangers. Maybe that's the
Yeah,
takeaway.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll split this podcast episode into like 10 different parts and just have a
Exactly.
cliffhanger. Tune in next
Exactly.
time.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
It's funny because I'm actually watching. I don't know if you've seen Better Call Saul on
Yeah.
Netflix, and it actually struck me that it's a Netflix production. Because as I was watching it, I just assumed it was pre-Netflix, even though I know because I watched Breaking Bad. But because it's slow, it takes its time in a very confident and competent way. But my impression of like Netflix is like just bang, bang, bang at the start. I just capture attention. But this is like proper storytelling, and yeah, is excellent.
Well, things like Ozark, etc., are also great. Although I do have to say, I think Better Call Saul, Nigel, was originally on AMC, and it was picked
It
up
was
for global by. I think it was picked up for global by Netflix. Don't
okay,
quote me
okay,
on it, but
okay.
I'm pretty sure it was
That would make
originally a
sense.
cable show. Yeah.
Okay,
But that's
that
not to
would make
say
sense.
Netflix can't do it, because they can with stuff like Ozark and Dark and other great. There are a lot of
Fair,
great,
that's fair.
wonderful shows on Netflix, of course. Yeah, you just want to
Yeah.
try to stay away from studio notes. I've gotten studio notes in the past that are like, there has to be a twist on this
Mm,
page or whatever. And that's when it's hard to, that's when it can be kind of creatively difficult to do. But I think that, like I said, the things that really stand the test of time, and the advantage that comics have, is that you can have more ownership over your creative, are things that tell classic, stories of triumphing over your flaws, just in an engaging, entertaining way.
yeah, and then with the comics it app, so you're at beta stage
Yeah.
now. All right, so what is the thing? I mean, this is like the sales pitch, right? What's the
Mm.
thing that makes it stand out? And we've had discussions about this, so I kind of know.
Mhm.
But yeah, what is that thing that makes it stand out, particularly in the face of this, what is, I guess, officially a crisis of reading for pleasure here
Mhm.
in the UK? Like, what is that connection that you're looking to make through the app?
I think it is about, there is no digital space online right now where kids can enjoy reading comics in a convenient manner on their devices, and continue their love of reading. So let me give you an example. When we started looking at this space, we did focus groups, and one of the kids that we spoke with said, actually, when he reads comics, most kids say when they read comics, the emotional reaction is being calm. It calms them down. And
Okay.
one kid said, no, it makes me frustrated. And I said, well, I didn't say, I wasn't in the focus group, but they said, why? And he said, because I know it's going to end. because I know that, I can, comics are, quick to read. You can get through them quite quickly. And I know when I start reading a comic, it's going to be over soon. And
Okay,
I
you should get
think,
into manga, given One
yeah, well,
Piece.
yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And that's obviously, a specific type of comic.
Yeah.
But I think that's where what we're doing is very interesting, because that's kind of interest in reading that's being left on the table in a little bit, in a way, because if you do finish reading the physical book and then there's nothing for you to read, and you're going to get something in a week's time or in a month's time or the next time you go to the shops or whatever, that's time that actually the child wants to keep reading as a form of for pleasure, for
Yeah,
entertainment.
yeah. That's a
That
lifetime for a
is
kid. A month, what are you
exactly,
talking
and
about? Yeah.
that's being lost. And what's going to fill the gap in that time? It's going to be a return
Mm,
to, it's going to be a return to gaming. It's going to be a return to vertical videos, or what have you, which are spaces which are, can be, negative for kids. So I think that's that accessibility point, where again we're just offering a really great selection of content in one place. It's all age appropriate. The parent doesn't have to worry that there's going to be any material on there which is questionable, or sexualized or violent or anything like that. It's all safe for the kids to read, and over time it will also feature more educational elements, like being able to select words, and that kind of thing, to learn definitions and things like that. And
okay.
the interesting thing that we found in our research is I think kids really are engaged with that. They like the idea of increasing the vocabulary. They like the idea of, like,
Mm,
even like almost like reading comprehension quizzes, which I was surprised by. So there's definitely that's kind of our unique proposition in the market. We are the best place for kids to go to read, and also to get into reading through comics, and also embolden their creativity through drawing tutorials, learning to draw, and then ultimately being able to do a lot of different things with their drawings in the app to create their own stories. So yeah,
mm.
I think in that respect we're quite differentiated from a lot of the other digital comics platforms, which target older consumers and tend to, have a fair amount of sexualized imagery and violence.
Mm. And you talked about it, the National Literacy Trust. And for those that don't know, the trust is an independent charity that is all about, like, empowering. I guess it's not just children; it's like just all people, young
Yeah.
adults, and fully grown adults as well. But it's all about literacy skills, so empowering them with literacy skills that people need to succeed. And they did a report in, actually, was it last year? Or was it
It was
before?
this year. I think it was May, June. They do it every year, but this was the year where it was particularly bad.
Yeah, so this is yeah, because
Yeah.
this is where I became more aware, and as I'm talking to people, and everyone kept referencing this report that showed that children and young people's reading for enjoyment is at an all-time low,
Mm.
and I think it's the lowest it's been since they started recording, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So none of that is good. And just to throw in some other stats from the National Literacy Trust report, they said that only 1 in 3 children and young people aged 8 to 18 say they enjoy reading in their free time, and only 1 in 5 say they read something daily in their free time.
Yeah.
So that, again, that's not good. Yeah, I don't even know where to go with that. That's the end of the episode. It's not good. It's dark. It's dark times. No, no, no. So
But
and obviously go ahead.
I was just going to say, but the report did have some positive
Okay,
news
give me some
for,
hope. Yeah.
yeah. So the positive news was that almost half of UK kids read comics regularly,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
the
I got.
enjoyment of reading comics is very good. And it's not in this report, but in the US, library checkouts of comics are at 90, are up year on year 90%, from COVID. So there is a huge interest in reading. It's just in a new medium.
There you go. So, and I've been talking to people who are in comics, and people who are lobbying, like, Arts Council here in the UK government, for better focused on comics. And I think, because I was saying before we started recording that I was recently at a conference, the booksellers children's conference. So essentially publishers and people in that realm talking about this. So everyone's scared about this, because whether from the just basic like moral side of it, of just it's scary to to think of kids reading less and less in a time, and knock-on effects linked to like poverty and just attainment and career progression, or even just the commercial side, because obviously if you're in publishing and you see kids like less interested in reading, you've got an existential crisis on your hands, because that's not a good sign. So wherever you land, so everyone's like panicked about this. And one of the things that I found, I'd say frustrating, because see, we make comics. Michael, you've got Comic App, and you're otherwise familiar with the world of comics and the impact on young people. And so that stat that you rightfully brought up as a silver lining, that essentially there's no crisis in comics, because that is a way to engage kids and keep them reading and keep them in the habit of reading. It is frustrating for me, and I wonder your thoughts on this, if you've seen it and what you felt. It's frustrating for me to see adults, either like parents or professionals in publishing, cry out at this crisis, and then when we see like kids reading comics, say that doesn't count, that's not real reading, comics aren't a serious thing, stop it. But also, kids aren't reading. What do we do? That's a frustrating thing to me. I saw it at this conference where, and to be fair, there were people like, because I was on a panel at the conference, but then I sat in on other panels, and some people did mention graphic novels and comics, but even and that's positive. But it also feels, sometimes it feels a bit separate. Like, I'm not talking about the people specifically who said it in this instance, but just in general, where people do bring up comics as like an other thing. And sometimes I almost want to get, even though we're talking about kids crisis in reading, I almost want to get adults into comics so they can really understand, because I don't think they really understand. They just know it's a thing, but they don't really understand the impact and why this medium has this connection with kids. So have you seen that as well? What do you feel?
I definitely, I think that it's the classic response that, it doesn't count as real reading. The encouraging thing I would say, I'm maybe not as au fait as you with the sort of publishing sector on this point particular, but I will say from our research, from our beta testing, that feeling has evaporated amongst gay parents for the most part.
Okay.
We actually did we were at the Lakes International Comic Art Festival a few weeks ago, and we demoed the beta there to about 100 families, and not every single parent agreed strongly that comics were good for their children and were a strong literacy tool. And admittedly, that was at a comics festival.
I was just going to say, but it's good. It is positive, but it's almost like a self-selecting audience.
I normally I would agree with you, but I would say we had an awful lot of people through the door that day who just happened to be walking by, that weren't there for the festival, because I spoke to everybody, and we had people there from immigrant backgrounds. We had people there who, we had people there driven, hours to be there. But then we also had
it's a free
people
event,
there.
right? So people just come in.
Exactly. And so we have people there, like I say, from overseas backgrounds. We have local people there. We have people who didn't even really know anything about comics, didn't have a strong opinion about them. And that was still the feedback we got. I do take your point that that is a, somewhat self-selecting group, but it was also very much what we found in terms of talking to educators, talking to librarians. And I think that the literacy, don't quote me on this, but I think the idea of this year of reading that the National Literacy Trust is putting into place, which is this new initiative in 2026. Well, it's actually the third time they've done it, but it's an initiative for next year to try to encourage kids and adults to read more. I think that they're one of the kind of main reasons, one of the main tacks they're doing is to try to say that, comics do count, digital reading counts, even gaming can count if it's reading intensive, trying to kind of redefine what reading is in the 21st century. And I think, or in the 2020s rather. And I think that's the kind of critical thing. And I think anyone who kind of harbors the idea that comics aren't real reading kind of misses the purpose in a way, because the goal of what we're trying to do with this platform is to create lifelong readers and to create people who, to create adults who like to read and kind of can enjoy the benefits of reading that I've outlined a few times here about, being empathetic towards other people and other cultures and, the world around them. And if you're not going to engage kids where they are, which is in comics, online, etc., then they're going to miss out on all of that. That's that would be a real disaster. That would be a real travesty.
No, for sure, and you mentioned a bunch of reasons why. I'll add one where, I mentioned early on that we do a work experience program and we do workshops with young people as well, and I've just seen the the not quite inability, not let me, it's not that bleak, but a habit of people not reading instructions and not just reading once, but rereading and just comprehending before asking a question. We had a few examples recently of someone replying to an email to ask a question that was in the email they replied to, and
Right.
just that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just that just the reading has so many. I can't believe we have to say this, but not every school has a library, so here it goes. Reading is important for other things outside of like just entertainment as well, and has knock-on effects
Yeah.
as I mentioned. Why do you think comics has that unique effect, as a learning tool compared to other reading materials for young people in particular?
Well, I think they're just, awesome. Comics are great. They're really fun. They are obviously visual. So, if you don't know a word or you don't know something, it's much easier to place than if
Mm,
you're reading a novel. And, I think fundamentally, comics have always been awesome for kids to read, and kids have always really liked reading them. I think the difference maybe is this evolution in what we understand comics to be in the UK and beyond, where it's saying, okay, well, it's not just superheroes, and not that there's a lot that are great about superheroes. Like I say, Marvel was one of my major influences growing up was Marvel comics, but like it isn't just superheroes or comic strips anymore. Now it is manga, it is epics, it is French Franco-Belgian adventures, and there's a whole world out there that exists that maybe the kind of pessimist you're describing in the don't know about, but actually kids know about it, particularly and
mm,
obviously we have to appreciate the massive rise in Japanese culture and anime that has influenced so much of popular culture in throughout Europe and the US now. But I think that means that people are much more open to new ideas and new styles, whereas when I was a kid, I again really liked manga and anime and stuff, but I was definitely not normal, quote unquote, for liking it. Maybe you did too. But like it wasn't like super common
no, it wasn't.
to be reading the Dragon Ball mangas when I was a kid, even though I did. And that's not the case anymore now, right? Like
Mm,
obviously these are the major publishing IPs for teenagers. So times are certainly changing, and I'm really happy that the Literacy Trust kind of have identified that that the times need to change, and we need to kind of meet kids where they are in order to foster this love of reading, because otherwise you'll just miss it.
yeah, we'll lose people as well.
Mhm.
And you talked about working in Japan and the differences there, and because one of the differences is they accept comics like at
Yeah,
all ages and in
yeah.
the mainstream. But from a making perspective, just curious to know, like, what do you see from the production side? There's the difference between, like, say, manga and Western comics, and how they tell stories and how they get things out like to the public.
Think there's obviously huge differences that are sort of readily apparent. I won't pretend to be. I mean, I'm a passionate professional in the space now who is a hobbyist who loves comics and manga and everything. Like the thing I did in Japan was the live action TV show, so I've never
Mm,
worked on the creation of a manga, so I can only report what I sort of hear from other people or my opinions. But I think the difference is that, and this kind of goes back to my previous point about understanding the market, right? Because basically there's a huge market for manga in Japan. Domestically, loads of Japanese read tons of manga. And that creates the conditions for lots of manga to be created, because you can create lots of manga and make money, selling them.
Mm.
And as a result, there is lots of people doing it. So the quality goes up because you have a lot of competition and lots of artists and publishers competing with each other. And the industry also becomes very professionalized. I think that I don't know the US space as well for comics, but I think, yeah, in the UK, we obviously have very valiant heroes like yourself, Nigel, standing up to to create your own sort of like initiative. But in Japan, they have 100 years of
Yeah.
professionalized, massive labor forces that are proper big corporate studios, publishers, etc., where you learn the trade from somebody else and you progress
Mm.
and on and on. So I say all that to say I think the manga industry is so multifaceted and they have so much being created that touches every facet of society. Inevitably, it's going to be a very deep and a very deep well of content to draw from, which isn't certainly isn't the same in the UK. Although there are obviously great comics created here, it's but like obviously the industry is a lot smaller, and yeah, I mean, and then the French also do a great job at creating long running great comics. But and I'm maybe speaking out of turn here because I don't actually know, again, the economics of their space as well. But I suspect that they benefit from having, government subsidies and support for artists, which again is more of a cultural thing of like, this is a great French art form that needs to be protected and nurtured by the state, which again is something which we don't have to the same degree as the UK in the UK as the French do.
No, I'm also not an expert, but when we were at the Children's Media Conference, I was on a panel. I was doing it was my panel, it was my idea, but I was chairing a panel about anime, just introducing it to that audience. And the person producing it is at Disney, and they were talking about some of the they've got their Dragon Strikers series and talking about collaborations with French studios and how it's received there. So it just feels just culturally different, and the culture informs the commercial side of it to a
Yeah.
certain extent as well. So yeah, maybe a lot of it is in informing the culture, which I guess with comics is part of that. So from where you are now, what can we look forward to? Like, what's the roadmap? Well, the non NDA version of the of the roadmap. What can we expect?
Well, so I would say we're very, very keen right now on working with creators who create age appropriate, all ages content. It
That sounds like
doesn't,
us. Sounds
yeah,
like us.
exactly. You guys, yeah. Well, we're already talking, but other people out there, like as Nigel, we were talking about, there isn't necessarily a clear space for this content to have its time in the sun. It isn't somewhere, that if put on, another major comics platform, it might not hit that the demo directly. So we're very, very, and it may be put next to something that is age inappropriate, which obviously isn't the objective. So I think what you can look forward to from us, what we're looking for from your audience really, is if there are creators in the UK or beyond that have great all ages material that work for kids and grown-ups. I think kids can read titles with mature themes, just as long
Oh
as they
yeah, for
don't
sure.
have
Yeah.
as long as it's not overt, like I say, overtly sexualized or overtly violent. It can be mature, and a lot of the great books for middle grade books are mature. So we're looking for creators who have content, have comic style content in any format, manga, French, Franco-Belgian, what have you. So yeah, we're looking for that kind of content to bring together the best indie creators in one place to sit alongside some of the bigger publishers that we'll be announcing shortly. And yeah, we'll be, and then the other thing is also collaborating with institutions and with, educational groups. So if you are involved in an educational group that wants a school or an after school activity or a sports club or anything where you kind of support what we're trying to do with getting kids into reading through comics, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, in terms of what you can expect from us, we will be on the market soon enough. And what I fervently hope comes to fruition is we can grow our app into something that kids around the UK can really, continue to progress their love of reading through comics, and ultimately provide new routes to distributing, the right type of content to the right audience, which right now, isn't as seamless as it could be, which is a shame because it's not allowing the kids to engage in reading as much as they want to, and so that's what
Yeah,
we're
it's
trying to
needed.
solve.
No, that's great, and yeah, no, I guess I should have added that disclaimer at the beginning, but yeah, we are on. You can find I think eventually all of our, our stuff on the app because it's something that we agree with, and again, I mentioned like Tazzii's because you've like Tazziii dived into like the whole library system and using that to catch up on manga. I need to do the same actually because I unfortunately don't read as much as I did when I was younger, and that's a sad indictment of me. But I'm going to work on that myself. So
Well, I'll tell you what, Nigel. Just do your best to get back into it, because I also, before we kind of went all out for this, I fell into the trap of not reading as much as I used to as well. And
mm,
since really kind of committing ourselves to this mission, I've made it a goal to read, both comics and novels again, and
yeah.
it's a huge benefit to my well-being. So I'd really recommend it.
Yeah. All right. So before we get to our guest pro tip, well, that's another question that we like to ask of all of our guests. And we're talking stories here, and then what makes a good story. And I feel that every one of us is a protagonist in our own story, and the best protagonists have that goal, that thing they're after, that vision of success. So for you, Michael, given what you've done up to now, and as you look ahead, what does success look like to you? And do you feel that you're there yet?
I think definitely don't feel like I'm there yet. Working hard to get there. I think if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I would have said, winning an Emmy or getting some kind of mainstream industry recognition, from some kind of group that I idolized when I was a kid would be it. And that would always be more than the financial side of things. But now I have to say, I think that success is believing in what you're doing and believing that what you're
Mm.
doing is good for the world. And so in that manner, actually, I would say yes. I tell a lie. I do feel successful because in my career I've done things because I thought they were good business opportunities, not necessarily because they had a strong mission component. And I realize now that being fully aligned with what you want to do, and bringing some good into the world is what success is, really.
I like that. I might have to copy and paste that and use
Yeah,
that
it's such a
as
nice message.
yeah. All right. So thank you for that. And with that, we'll get into our guest advice. In each interview, we like to ask our guests to give some advice for aspiring creative professionals and practitioners. So, we've been talking comics, storytelling. Michael, what advice do you have for others listening who, might want to get into making comics and or just stories of any kind and put them out into the world?
I think my biggest advice would be just start. So I know I said earlier, it's important to understand the business context, and it is, particularly when you need to make money to support yourself. But I think the most important thing is just to start and to just put it out there in
Mm,
whatever rudimentary form. I think so many great ideas die on the cutting room floor because people just work on, they don't ever actually complete them, or they don't put them out into the world. And I think, again, the great thing about comics is you can publish, hopefully you'll be able to publish on comics in the future. You can publish on Webtoon now. You can just publish
mm,
on social media and just get feedback, start putting your work out there, and start building a community of like-minded people. I think, the Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness.
yeah, yeah,
A,
yeah. I think they
a
scrubbed that
good.
out now. I don't know what
Oh, right.
that was. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
I'm not
true.
sure. Yeah,
That's true.
we might turn
But
down the
but
lights. But
but I would say that for the creative industries, the great ideas die in development is probably a good
mm,
good thing to say. If you're in the kind of creative sector and you're only focused, and I've definitely fallen into this trap, if you're only focused on just like what the gatekeepers think of you from famous companies, and it's like, what does X person at Y studio think of my work, then that's going to really get to you, probably, unless you're very lucky and you're amazing and you storm ahead. It's possible, but that for the most part does get to people, I think, because again, they don't understand the full context, and then they get stuck, and then they feel less than, or they start doing things, they fall out of the alignment I mentioned earlier, because you start just doing work for money, and then it's like, well, I didn't get into this to do this specific thing, and then you feel dissatisfied. So I think the most important thing is just start and just get your work out there. I think any creative person would probably agree the most gratifying part of being creative is when your work is shared with others anyway.
Mm. No, I agree with that. That's good advice. So, listeners, let us know what you think. If you're creating your own stories, we do meet a lot of young people who are trying to make that leap from not starting to starting, and yeah, it can be as easy as that. But let us know, studio77 at myamatter.com. Before we wrap up for the episode, let's not forget about the bonus round.
This is the part where we throw some follow-up questions or random questions that didn't quite fit anywhere else. And the question that immediately pops into my mind is, what comics have caught your eye recently?
Well, so I think given our focus on the kids market, I've been looking at a lot of kids comics, and I was really impressed. So first of all, I have to tip my hat to Bunny versus Monkey and everyone at the
Yeah.
Phoenix Comic. They have really forged the way for what feels like a renaissance in a way of British comics. So Jamie Smart and then the whole team at the Phoenix Comic, definitely Donut Squad, Bunny versus Monkey, incredible stuff. I was really impressed in Frankfurt at the book fair with the Philippines were the guest of honor this year. They had a lot of really great comics there for all ages. And I wasn't aware of the long and very interesting history of comics in the Philippines.
Right.
So I definitely recommend checking out. There's a cool group out in the Philippines called Comixit who come to the UK sometimes. They're kind of an NGO that brings together individual Filipino creators. So I'd recommend checking them out. They're cool.
Nice. And you mentioned like growing up with like superheroes and stuff. Who is your favorite superhero?
It's a difficult one to say. I would probably say for me the most impactful one. My favorite is Wolverine because he's the coolest.
Yeah.
But I was very influenced, I think, by Captain America. Just his sort of doing good, but then falling out of favor with the government and that whole plot line when he became Nomad.
Okay.
I think that was that was very in line with my thinking as a kid.
Nice. And then, so this is kind of like to do with libraries, as my library is currently getting a refurb, which in some ways is annoying, but other ways is actually quite handy because it means they create a better delivery system for books. Anyway, what is the one feature that you wish every library had?
Ooh, good question. I think it would, having done some work in libraries around England, I think it would be great if there was, when it came to comics, more of an educational piece for parents to kind of understand all these benefits that are kind of second nature for us to discuss. To your point, Nigel, that maybe if the immediate reaction is like, oh, it's not real reading, or why don't you go read, War and Peace or whatever. I think I'm not sure what this feature would look like, but just something that differentiates or just lifts up the medium in a way that adults understand too would be really helpful.
Yeah. And then finally, where are people able to find you online?
So yeah, you can follow us on Comixit app on Instagram, and then you can join our newsletter at www.comixit.app. So Comixit app comes up with what you need.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate like the context and seeing your journey as well, where you come from and what you brought over, like particularly the business side of it. So I look forward to seeing what comes of Comixit, and yeah, just getting that those percentages up, because that was some dire reading of the enjoyment of reading among young people.
Definitely.
So yeah,
Definitely.
we can do better. We can do better.
But yeah, luckily, I am hopeful that we are successful in our mission. But of course, it's heroes like you and Mayamada that have been fighting the good fight for a long time that give us the grounding to have a chance. So congratulations to you guys for continuing to have such a worthy mission.
No, I appreciate that. It's yeah. If only you'd known how we started, and none of that was there. But you start, like you say, to your point, you start something, and then you sort of
Yeah,
find a purpose, and then it makes sense looking back. So no, I appreciate you
exactly.
saying that.
I think yeah, finding your purpose, that's the key advice.
Yeah,
Find your purpose,
purpose.
like
Yeah,
you say.
yeah.
Yeah,
It does. It makes a difference. So
yeah.
there you go, listeners. That's the mission. Find a purpose.
Easy.
Easy, yes. Simple. Come back to us next week when you've got it.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, if listeners, if you enjoyed this episode of Story X Story, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you can, so you don't miss an episode. Also, give us a 5-star rating and review, because that helps us reach new listeners and fans of story discussions. If you couldn't already tell, we are also story creators, so you can discover our manga universe online. You can get our titles there as well, including the latest Origins Against All Odds. If you're not able to catch us at an upcoming event as well, and if you are, you can get it signed as well. We did some signing over the weekend for some young girls in the Festival of the Girl. Don't forget to follow us online as well, particularly on Twitch, where we do our Studio 77 stuff. We've also got our Discord as well. You can connect with us in between episodes. And as we do things live on Twitch, you can chat with us there too. And we're coming to the end of the year, but we do have some Do I Look Like a Gamer events. This is our video game representation campaign, where we are promoting inclusion and diversity in the video games industry. So got a bunch of plans. We'll be at Comic-Con, we'll be at Square Enix, we've got some online event to end the year as well. And then we are planning to do it all over again next year. So you can be involved with that, whether it's the photo campaign or the events. Get involved, looklikeagamer.com. And as for the podcast, we release new episodes on Thursdays, and those include creator interviews like these, video game discussions, and deep dives into stories across pop culture. You can always give us a shout directly. Our email address is studio77@mymatter.com, and our website with links to subscribe is mymatter.com/story-x-story. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time, remember, don't judge a book by its cover or a person by their accent. Take care, everyone.